my duties in Lynchburg City. You folks ain't seen Mr. Meeks about, have you? Fella runs the general store?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, I was hoping to see him about some medicine, but perhaps tomorrow. See, I've been feeling rather poorly the last few weeks. Doctors, they ain't certain, but they believe it's beginnings of typhoid. Something far too common around these parts, I'll tell you that. My wife, Mary, she weren't too keen on the idea of me coming into town this evening at all. She worries quite a bit about me. And I realize, folks, where are my manners? I have not introduced myself. My name is John W. Woodson, attorney at law. You may have noticed that by the sign. Weather beaten as it is, looks like myself. I live just a few miles north of here with my wife Mary and our 4 children. And I've been a practicing attorney for going on near 20 years now, ever since graduating from the University of Virginia. I hung my shingle here in the village back in '54. My office, of course, convenient to the courthouse. Now, most of my cases and my clients ain't nothing too exciting to speak on. Mostly civil lawsuits, property disputes, wills, deeds, things like that. And back before this current war, I was never elected to public office or nothing, but I considered myself a very active member of the Whig Party. I didn't have a whole lot of use for those Yankee abolitionists or the black Republicans up north, but nor for those fire-eating secessionist radicals down south neither. But for myself, I tell you, and I suspect a lot of folks around here feel much the same. It was Mr. Lincoln's call for volunteers following the firing on Fort Sumter that turned me into a secessionist. And when Virginia voted to secede from the Union, I offered my services, such as they were, to raise a company of soldiers for the Confederate Army. Before we even left for Richmond, most of my recruits, they got diverted to other units. Sad to say, they'd even elected me captain. Instead, I reckon the Army must have seen something in my education and my legal experience. They appointed me as an assistant quartermaster with the rank of captain. That was a little more than 2 years ago, back in March of '62. And my office is in Lynchburg. You all familiar with the city of Lynchburg? Well, you know of the Citizens Savings Bank on Main Street? Yeah. My office is just above it on the 2nd floor. Although, to be honest, I do much of my business from the saddle of a horse. Probably partly led to my condition. See, it's my responsibility to gather supplies in all the counties around the city of Lynchburg, send it to the Army. You folks familiar with how important the horses and mules are in our Army? Tens of thousands of them just in General Lee's Army alone. Corn, oats, hay, all that's needed in massive quantities. We ship all that out on the South Side Railroad over to Petersburg and then to the Army. Now, I reckon I have not become the most popular person hereabouts as of late, having to enforce some pretty unpopular policies of our government. As I'm certain y'all are familiar with them, the tax in kind and impressment. Officers such as myself going to your farm and confiscating supplies and paying what the government authorizes me to pay, not what the market would bear. A lot of unhappy folks. You should see my correspondence. Well, it's also my responsibility to conscript slaves into our army as laborers, teamsters, nurses, even grave diggers. And it may surprise you folks just how many in this our new Confederacy that ain't too patriotic when it comes to giving up a bit of their property to sustain the cause. They may be fine with speeches and all the hoopla of war, but when someone like myself shows up, that changes. And there are some folks around here, even in this village, trying to take advantage of all this, trying to make some money off this war, if you can believe it. Right around the corner is one of them. His house, Mr. Wilmer McLean is who I'm speaking of. Lately in Manassas, he sells sugar to our army. Imports it all the way from Cuba, from what I understand, inflating that price Word is, folks, he's made over $50,000 already on that trade. In the midst of a war for our very survival, I don't know about y'all, but I consider that conduct nothing short of disgraceful. And all the while, our brave soldiers are fighting and dying for our very independence by the thousands. Soldiers like poor Lafayette Meeks. He's buried back here, just beyond his father's property. He died back in '61 in camp. Of typhoid fever, as a matter of fact. And I worked with his father, Francis, for more than a year and a half to try to get his back pay and effects from our Army. A year and a half to secure $30 measly for his parents. Folks, I must have spent more than that on the paperwork and the postage of the case. But such is the nature of the bureaucracy there in our government in Richmond. Folks, I do apologize, but I reckon I better get back to this paperwork while my strength holds. I do fear this typhoid may very well be the death of me, but I bid y'all good night.
Good night.